I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. When people think of the potential for artificial intelligence to impact the biopharmaceutical industry, the focus is usually on drug discovery or in the clinic to help guide decision making with regards to pairing the right drug to the right patient. Yseop is focused on a more mundane use for the technology, the writing of clinical data reports. The company had been working in the financial services industry when it was approached by Sanofi to see if it could apply its natural language generation to make the creation of these reports faster and less expensive. We spoke to Emmanuel Walckenaer, CEO of Yseop, about artificial intelligence, its potential to change the way biopharmaceutical companies work in non-obvious ways, and why a large number of biopharmaceutical companies are turning to AI to do more with less. Emmanuel, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for inviting me. Very glad to be here.
We're going to talk about artificial intelligence, Yseop, and its efforts to integrate AI into the workplace to automate repetitive tasks and enhance human capacity. There's been a fair bit of activity to integrate AI into drug discovery and drug development, to use it to do clinical diagnostics and even business strategy. We're going to focus on what some may view as a more mundane slice of the biopharmaceutical world, clinical study reports. For people who may not be familiar with clinical study reports, what are they? What role do they play in moving a drug from the lab to the marketplace?
Well, we're talking about the last mile of the new drug introduction process, where you have got in the clinical, when the pharma company is doing a trial, they collect enormous amount of data, specifically in phase 3. When they test their drug with with hundreds or thousands of patients, to test whether it's working, the efficacy of the drug, and so on. So they really collect a ton of data, and they have to analyze this data and really write a pretty structured document required by the FDA, so that they have to, really dissect what was going on, what is the population targeted, what was the adverse events, what is the efficacy of the document. And they have to produce this document, which is pretty cumbersome with a lot of appendixes, and they have to produce that to the FDA so that the FDA can actually review the result of the clinical trial. So it's pretty important document, again, really at the last mile of the introduction, drug introduction process before, you can actually market that.
What makes clinical study reports good candidates for automation through the use of artificial intelligence?
Well, that's a very good question. We used, Yseop, which is specialized in NLG. It's a subset of artificial intelligence called, NLG, natural language generation. So our job is really to take, to transform large amount of complex data into, I would say, narrative or documents, very well written, high quality documents anybody can understand. And we had, we were actually, to be honest, we were specialized in banks. We were automating credit risk report, rating reports for, the largest rating agencies in the world. And this is what we're doing. And then, Sanofi, I think it was 4 years ago, knocked at our door and said, guys, you are transforming data, financial data right now, if we understand correctly, into these, this report for credit analyst, again, and financial analyst. Can we do that for CSR? And we had no idea. We said, wow. And we say, guys, the best thing is really to work on your data, on the type of report you're currently manually writing, and we'll see whether it works or not. And we spent, quite some time with them to do that work. At the end of the day, we told them, yes, it could absolutely work. And there are, it was actually, I would say, 5 to 6 times more difficult than finance, because the data are changing for every trial, every clinical trials. You may have different, slightly different format of data, where in finances are all, always the same. And what you write has to be perfect, and has to be, I would say, medically sound. I mean, it has to be, quite perfect. Now, having done that now on hundreds, I would say, of clinical trials, it works very well. And we don't automate the whole CSR right now. We automate, approximately 40% of the document, still, hundreds of pages, but only 40%. And we do today only the data-driven paragraphs. As an example, describing the demography of the trial. So that's, purely data-driven. You can describe the population, the variety of the population, their age, and so on. So that's something we are very good at. The adverse events as well, massively data-driven. So we can write that very easily. Efficacy is a bit harder, and other documents which are purely descriptives are even harder. So working on that step by step, we believe with our technology, in the next 18 months, we can cover 80% of the document. I think 100% is not a realistic goal. And I don't think even this would be, something we would target ever. We want to produce a draft for the medical writer so that the medical writer can actually review it. And our tool gives us the ability to, automatically get more detail, less detail, depending on the paragraph. So where he wants, more accuracy or something a little bit more global. So it's really a dialogue with the medical writers, but there is always human in the loop, because that human in the loop, we are humble. We produce the, a draft, the first draft, so that the medical writer can, go much faster. Does that make sense?
It does, but how are these reports generally put together? What are the inputs and what's the output?
Inputs are really all the information. The medical writers, he receives and he has to work with biostatisticians so that, the data makes sense. So there is a whole work to be done with the biostatisticians. And then, he got this result, through tables, SAS tables, and then he has to, really copy or, resume the description of the protocol, which is described in another document. So he's compiling a lot of different information. But the difficult part is the analysis of the data. And this is where we help. Because this is where we're super strong.
I call these reports seemingly mundane within the biopharmaceutical world, but in reality, there's a large volume of data behind these reports, and to bring automation into them requires a lot of technology, including what you called natural language generation, and not just in one language, but I understand you're doing this in 7 languages. How
Right.
did you talked about the work with Sanofi, but what are you doing now in this regard? How much have you broadened this out as a product?
So that's we do that in different languages, and that's one of our specialty. And we don't do translation. We write, in good German or French or Dutch or American. In pharma, most of the requests are in American, or in English. So it has to be that way. We are pretty much, we're pretty much advanced. I mean, we are right now working with 6 out of the top 15 biggest pharma companies in the world, at different stages, of course. Sanofi is really at the deployment phase, and they're expanding to other documents now. We have as well, and Eli Lilly in the US, who is as well accelerating. It started with another document, the appendix of the CSR, we call patient narratives, where you describe, for each patient, each specific patient, what happened, what is the history during the trials and so on. So it's pretty cumbersome as well to write. So there as well in the deployment phase. A third one as well, in a big pharma company in the UK is starting to, full deployment. And others are, a little bit more in the pilot phase and starting to, to engage. But 6 out of top 15 is, for me, very encouraging. And with, all the discussion we have right now, I guess by, in the next 2 to 3 quarters, we'll be engaged with, at least 10 very big pharma companies. They are very interested into this type of technology because I would say the medical writing community is under high pressure. As I told you, this process, to write, all these documents is coming really at the very late stage of new drug introduction. And this is where there is, massive pressure on these teams. Now, when you think about that, and, I have been discussing with, many pharma companies and CROs, and they're all telling me the same, say, in the next 10 years, the number of trials, the number of new drug that we have to put in the market is going to skyrocket for many different reasons. I mean, business reasons, fundamental reasons in the research. So I would say the pipeline is, very, very full. And the, the medical writer community, they are highly skilled people. I mean, this is, we're not talking about, there are PhDs that have done, master in biology, it takes years to train a good medical writers. And they're telling me, everybody's fishing in the same pond, and we can't train these guys. So the only solution, if we want to face, all the work that is going to come the years to come, we better equip these guys with some artificial intelligence. And I would say our solution seems to really perfectly fit their need. So the idea is really to augment these medical writers so that they can do more with, with the limited time they have, because again, they're under pressure when, the time is ticking and every day matters when you introduce a new drug. And there are sometimes, hundreds of thousands of millions of patients waiting for, a new vaccine, a new drug. And, time is money, but time is more than money in this case, because it's really all about to save lives.
You talked about this having a lot more complexity than financial data. What were the challenges you needed to overcome?
So that's, there's two big challenges. One is, a technical challenge which, we'll solve, and we are solving pretty well, is again, the data complexity and the fact that for every trial, the data is actually slightly, but it may change. And then you have got different therapeutic areas. So, the variety of what you have to ingest in the solution is quite large. So that's one. And, we have whole type of technology to cope with this problem. And I think we're about there. It's working now pretty seamlessly. The second challenge is what you write has to be perfect. Again, the medical writers, they are highly sophisticated people. They sometimes have done that for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So, when you tell them, guys, we're going to have a AI a writing bot writing the first draft for you, they are intrigued, but their level of expectation is pretty high. So what you write has to be perfect. Otherwise, they will immediately tell you, well, come on, guys, I don't want to review something which is badly, it is inaccurate or badly written, it has to be perfect. So that's a big challenge. Now, I would say the end user adoption is always our biggest challenge at Yseop, whether it's our banks or pharma, because people may be a little bit scared. So, my God, you know, you are going to do 40% of this report for me. So, you know, are you going to, when is this going to stop? So there's always a fear. Am I going to lose my job? So we are really working with every single customers so that we can train, so that we can explain what we do. It's not a black box. All the configuration can be managed by the, by our customers so that they really understand how this is configured. It's, you have to train the guys, you have to pick, the right people at the beginning, and you have to measure always, to measure their satisfaction. And I would say after 3 months, all the times, we have very high level of satisfaction from the end users, but this is critical so that then they're using the tool, they're happy with it. And I remember we asked at one point the medical writers at Sanofi, would you ever imagine now to work without Yseop? And they say, well, no. I mean, this is super helpful for us. We are gaining time. This is, we can really focus on what matters in these documents, really understand what we want to tell the FDA and not be bothered by, all these very, I would say, cumbersome writing. So that's, data and end user adoption. And that's very interesting, I would say, technically and, on a human perspective, this is super interesting to work on this type of stuff.
I think many listeners may be familiar with natural language processing, or at least the concept of it. You talk about natural language generation. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, actually, we do a little bit of both. So, yeah, NLP, when people, thinks about natural language and AI, it's really what we call natural language understanding. So doing really the opposite, trying to understand when you tap on Google, something, okay, you need to understand, you need to analyze what is written and turn that into bits and bytes. We do the opposite. We take bits and bytes and we write, what do the data means. So that's, I would say symmetrical approach. We are using, all of them. So we are using, natural language generation. Of course, this is the main of our technology, but we are using as well NLP, in some part of our solution, specifically related to data recognition, column recognition, label recognition, so that we can ingest easily, data in our solution.
You talked about this being a way to augment the medical writer and not replace the medical writer, but how does this change the role of the medical writer and how they go about putting together a clinical study report?
Well, it's changed their role pretty, well, in fact, it's quite important. So we had, Sanofi was kind enough to give a testimonial back in June. This was in Chicago at DIA, which is, an event. And they said, well, number one, the efficiency gain was about, 20 to 30%. When you think about that, this is quite important. So it's not 2% or whatever, it's, 20, 30%. So, really gaining time. And they say that as I mentioned earlier, the medical writer satisfaction is super high. And we had another event. It was 2 weeks ago at DPharm. It was in Boston with, and again, Eli Lilly was, nice enough to do a presentation on their experience deploying this type of tool with their medical writing community. And they say, a few very interesting, and they shared a few very interesting metrics. They say, well, and this was on narratives. So, as I say, narratives is a little bit of different documents, but you have to issue hundreds of narratives for each trials where you describe all the details about the patients and so on. So they say not only this is saving a lot of time, it used to take us 4 hours for each narrative, for each patient. It took us 4 hours to do one narrative. And now it's 4 seconds. So we move from 4 hours to 4 seconds. So that's big impact. And they say the quality check, which is takes very a lot of time. I mean, these documents are again reviewed. They have at the end of the day, what they want to deliver to the FDA is a very consistent, very professional, and a perfect document to the FDA. So there's a lot of quality cycle and so on. They say, well, we reduced as well the time to check these documents because they are made by the machine, because they're well configured, because they're well written, and everything is traceable, auditable, and so on. We gain trust and we gain a lot of time as well to review these documents. So, true impact for the medical writers, save them time. I think it's fair to say that for a section we do automate, the time for the medical writers to really be comfortable with what is written is going to be reduced by 50 to 70%. So that's it's just a big acceleration for them. It's a big support, big help.
What is the system to do well, and where is the human aspect needed?
What the machine does very well is, again, data crunching, describing the data, doing a first set of analysis. Again, what is related to data, this is just, perfect for a machine. What the other machine does not is, machine doesn't have any intuition. The machine doesn't have any experience that the medical writers has, where to focus the analysis for this specific drug, for this specific population. What would be really the key highlights that the FDA will be interested in? This is, the machine doesn't do that well. So we are really helping the medical writers to say, all right, guys, this is what we see on the data. Where do you want to speak? And if he says, I want to really give a lot of precision for this type of population, this type of adverse events, then we can do the job very perfectly. You see what I mean? So it's really a combination between what the medical writer wants to say, and he really tells the machine, okay, tell me about that. And then the machine, do that in 1 second. But what he wants to say on a pure medical standpoint and so on, this is the medical writers. So that, in a way, our job is to make medical writers true medical writers, really focus on what they want to say. And the machine is going to write that for them immediately. So it's really a dialogue. I don't see the machine as something being, brute force or, this is a draft and this is it. This is really a dialogue, and our solution is designed so that we initiate really a dialogue between the medical writers and the machine so that the medical writer drives the process and get exactly what he wants, but much faster.
How have medical writers who have used the system responded to it?
So, there's always a little bit of fear initially. There's one thing to consider as well, is that every company has their own habits and their own way of writing. And this is where the configuration is important, the initial configuration. So before rolling out this type of solution, you start with a, small set of medical writers, get the machine to understand and learn, how they actually write, and maybe, little details and so on, but this sum of details make that, they recognize what they see and they are comfortable with what they see. So that's, usually a phase which takes, a few weeks, and then you can start the rollout. It's actually, we have been working on that for now, 4 years in the pharma industry, and I would say the feedback we got from the medical writers, across the board are pretty consistent. And I think we are now at a point where within a few weeks, again, you can really fine tune the solution so that it match, the pharma specificities of our customer, but then you can roll out pretty quickly, and they love it. It's a bit sometimes still a shock because, this has not been historically a place where AI or automation has taken place. So, it's a bit of moving from a very manual process to a semi-automatic process, and that's sometimes a bit of a shock.
Are there any regulatory issues around this? Would a regulator even be aware that a clinical study report was generated in part with using AI?
Well, that's we had the same, and Yseop is really focused on highly regulated industry. So this is something we've been facing, I would say, almost day one, because we're producing as well documents that are used by the SEC or other highly regulated environment. So there is a few things. One, yes, we do have a lot of constraints in terms of quality, auditability. This is pretty heavy. They call that GXP environment. So but yes, we have to develop our solution in certain ways. And again, anything we do, anything the end user does, and so on, is audited, is audit trailed, and we need to be absolutely certain that what is written is accurate and perfect. Now, so that's that's I would say that's what we do, and we know these constraints and so on. Does the regulator knows? So they are actually pretty comfortable if this is done, with the state of the art quality and auditing capability and so on. They're pretty comfortable with that. Now, never forget, we are not automating, 100%, and then this is it. We send that to the FDA. There's always, and they will be, for I think a very long time, human in the loop. So, the medical writers is actually reading what we wrote, what the machine has written, it can do some changes, it can do some modification. There will be then review cycles and so on. So, at the end of the day, it's just more efficient, but with, the responsibility is still, under the medical writer hand to, to sign the document.
What's the payoff? Is there any way to quantify savings in terms of time or money?
Yes, this is quite important. The big, there's two big focus: time and money. Money, I would say it's more efficiency. How much efficiency can you gain? How much more efficient a medical writer can be? How will the, I would say, quality check and quality reviews can be streamlined? And most of the time, our customers are actually, I would say, not only introducing, this AI solution with their teams, but review their process. Their main goal is time. So that, they can do more with less, but they can actually reduce the time to actually issue a CSR. To give you, some order of magnitude, a CSR may take in average, just to give again, an order of magnitude may vary, vastly, but, let's say 8 weeks. If you used to take 8 weeks, what we think is that what we can reduce with a solution like Yseop, we can reduce this timeline to, 3 weeks. So we can more than divide by 2 the time required to issue this type of document. And that's really, this is I would say, a very high impact solution. So, moving from 8 weeks to 3 weeks, may take time. Again, to review process may take, 12 months to achieve that, to really train all the team, to review the quality cycles and so on. But you can definitely move from, 8 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks, which is massive when you think about it.
And What do you think this says about the potential for AI within biopharmaceutical companies? Is it something that people have tended to think about more narrowly? And what do you think it'll take to have companies embrace this more broadly?
Um, I've read an analysis. I think it was from Accenture, saying, what are the industries who are actually embracing AI the most? And actually, pharma was number one. As you say, it's not just energy. It's about drug discovery. So there's a lot of I would say a lot of focus on how AI can actually help in this overall drug discovery, development, and introduction. So we're just a small part of that. What strikes me is that a lot of people meeting in conference 3 years ago, 2 years ago, were really not aware of any of this type of solution. They were, oh my God, can you do that really? So there's a little bit of, are you sure it's working? And now, now we've deployed that, we're called early adopters or visionaries like, Sanofi, Eli Lilly, and others. It's a small world, and we have an excellent word of mouth. So, we are now in discussion with, dozens of pharma companies. So they're really intrigued. So when I see the number of clinical trials who have been involved last year and this year and next year, I see the forecast because, our customers are sharing, okay, guys, we're going to use your product next year for, I don't know, 50 or will be, these numbers of trials, clinical trials will be involved are actually basically it's a 300 or 400% growth year over year. So this is really, taking off. There will be thousands, in the next 5 years when I see that, there are thousands of trials who are going to be involved. So this is really taking off. This is real now. And, they're fast to catch up, these guys. Because again, this solve a pretty important issue the industry is facing. So that's very encouraging. And the potential is very large. We talked a lot about the CSR, but there are only in the clinical space, there are 10 different types of documents we could automate. And we're working on that. So we have a full roadmap there. In preclinical, there are other type of documents we could automate. In the manufacturing and quality control, called CMC, there are other documents we can automate. When you think about, medical information, there are other documents. In pharmacovigilance, other documents. So the potential is really massive. So that's, pretty exciting and cool for us because, we're really having a lot of demand and a lot to do to accelerate, and that's cool.
Emmanuel Walckenaer, CEO of Yseop. Emmanuel, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.